The views expressed in this podcast are solely based on personal experience and is not intended to replace professional medical advice. Our opinions should not be taken as therapeutic advice, as this podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Police Condition. I'm Ryan, and as always, sitting across from me and always beside me, my wife, Laura.
Hello.
Today's episode, we're talking about police identity. And if you're anything like me, being a cop was my life. And that took priority over everything.
Yeah, identity is something we all hold and value within ourselves. It's the values we do hold. It's our societal identity. It's emphasis on self-esteem or emphasizes self-esteem and the roles we play in society. It really focuses on family, race, gender, religion, interests, and occupational roles. For instance, I identify as an Italian American. I'm a Caucasian woman. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm a friend. I'm also a student of psychology and a clinical student in a therapeutic environment. And I know with police officers, it's kind of the same things, but there's just more emphasis on the occupational identity, I think.
Yeah, so much. It was always being a cop came first, doing cop things came first, always, hell, even dressing the part when we went out when I wasn't even working.
Mm. Yeah, you'd wear like the blue line and the shirts and like even your ring, right? You had the blue line on your wedding ring
Right. For a
and
long time, I wore all that. I wore the bracelets and everything. And it's like I wanted everybody to know I was a cop. And I never realized, I guess, really the danger it could have put my family in. Because as we know, there's a lot of people out there that don't really like cops right now.
mm.
So,
And for me as your wife, like I never questioned it because I felt like you were very proud of it. And that was something that like I supported you in, and I really felt like, oh well, he's really, proud of the work he does, but I wasn't really realizing how much that cop identity was just the forefront of everything else.
right. Yeah. And I was. I still am. I'm very proud of being a police officer. I'm proud of what I do.
Mm.
But there's a lot other things in my life than just being a cop. And I've kind of come to that idea of, yeah, being a cop is awesome. I love it, but it is just my job. And I'm so much more than that now.
Mm. Yeah, you definitely are much more than that. I mean, you're a brother, you're a son, you're a husband, you're a dad. And I think, especially with the dad identity, like you were so excited when we first had our firstborn and our second and our third, but you were just so excited about them all and you wanted to be that dad. But like when you got into situations where it might have, needed some discipline or something, you put on the cop identity before the dad identity. And you could see that because that's what you were used to. That's what your brain's conditioned to just function that way. And, nothing terrible came out of it, but it was just you're wanting them to comply with you. And when they didn't, because they were like 2, 3 years old, it was hard for you to like understand the difference between that. And I think you struggled a lot with that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think our kids got it the worst because they not only got the cop, but they also got the Marine in me also
Yeah.
sometimes. And I realize I can't just knife hand my children and yell at them to get them to do something.
We don't abuse our kids, I promise. Sometimes it's hard. Like I've seen you walk away plenty of times because you're just like at your like limit of like I just don't know what to do here. I've thrown out the cop, I've thrown out the Marine, I've thrown out like just everything I could, but the dad was so suppressed in you, and I know you were so like trying so hard to get him to come out, but everything else was just there before that to
Oh, yeah,
parent
yeah.
for you.
It was all kind of drilled into me to have to do these things, have to do certain things, have to get that compliance when I needed it. And you can't get compliance out of a 2-year-old.
No, definitely
Hell, we can't even get compliance out of our 6-year-old. So,
yeah. Too bad. But no, it's you can't just take your cop brain off. When you get off shift and come home and put your dad brain on or your husband brain, it just doesn't work that way.
yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah.
Especially if I've had a long night, dealt with a lot overnight, and then I come home and barely get any sleep because Either the kids are being loud, or you've got your schooling to do or work to do, and I need to go into dad mode right away. And
Mm.
you know me without sleep, I'm not always happy,
I
but
think that's everybody. Yeah,
yeah,
that's you get overstimulated so easily too, and coming from like a long 12-hour shift, lack of sleep, and then like kids literally screaming in your ear. Yeah, it's to anyone would go insane. I feel like at that point.
yeah, which I'm so far not insane yet,
No,
but
not yet.
we're
Yeah.
getting there.
Sometimes I feel like, at least me, I feel like it. Sometimes it's like it's too much, but yeah, I mean, it's life stressors, and just gotta deal with it.
Oh yeah,
But it's so important to understand, I guess, that those life stressors, when they get that bad, I mean, there are things we can do, and I think that's the beauty of behavioral changes, and understanding, like, have an awareness of when we get this stress, when we get this overstimulated, when we kind of make that connection of like, yeah, I have lack of sleep, I've been on the job too long, and things happened, and like you're just kind of have that awareness of what's going on with you and your system. Um, and that's where you take that break, you take that breath, you walk away, you go outside. I mean, all these things are good for you, your health, your and daily cognitive functioning.
yeah. I mean, something I learned, and I know we've talked about it before, is the physiological sigh, and most people won't quite understand what that means just by hearing it, but really it's a deep breath plus an extra deep breath at the very end,
Mm-hmm.
and it helps so much just to kind of almost relax you. You know, what is it exactly?
Um, it has been studied. I know they talk about this on the Andrew Huberman podcast. If anyone's ever listened to him, he's awesome. He's from neuropsych. I don't think he's a neuropsychologist. It's just neuroscience, and he has just great things on his podcast. But they did talk about kind of the science, or not the science, but the studies behind it. That just one physiological sigh will help calm the system more than any other one. So I know people do like box breathing or just like count breathing or whatever, and that helps too. They've noticed that this when you sigh in, so you take the deep breath in your nose, and then at the very top where you don't think you could take any more breath, you take an extra breath, and it pops all those sacs in your lungs, which are carbon dioxide sacs, and then you breathe out slowly. What it does, it's you usually have to not usually you have to breathe out from your diaphragm, and when you're breathing in, your diaphragm contracts from your heart. So when your heart is racing, it kind of slows the heartbeat. So it's more of a physiological way of slowing your heartbeat, because you can't just tell your heart to slow down, slow down. It doesn't work that way. So using your diaphragm, using the physiological sigh, it helps calm your system down a lot more.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's kind of like, as most military or law enforcement have learned, is combat breathing or box breathing. It's a little bit different, I know, because you're not holding it in as long, and but it calms you down a little bit and helps you kind of rethink what you're thinking,
Yeah.
and hey, I'm about to yell at my child for yelling and screaming, but hold on. Okay, they're just kids. They're just
Mhm.
being kids. Let's relax.
Well, it's the funny thing about our bodies. We go to fight or flight like instantaneously. It takes half a millisecond to get there. And yeah, I think the interesting thing about our bodies and our minds is like during that instance where you're something you encountered while you were being aggravated with your child activated your limbic system, which is our fight or flight response. And normally that is activated by any of our five senses. So something you smelled, saw, touched, um, tasted. I didn't think you'd be tasting something in that situation, but anything that is activated through your five senses it's going to trigger your brain to recall something from the past. Um, and sometimes it's just conditioned responses that we have because you've had this incident before, maybe not with your kid, maybe with a loved one, mom or dad or a spouse or something, and your brain is like saying, hey, there's danger afoot, like we need to figure this out. So we go into an Olympic activation, and when that happens, it usually comes very quickly, five like 0.5 milliseconds, and we react solely based off of that system. The only issue with that, our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain where we rationalize things, we have logic, we have reasoning. It's not on. It shuts off when that happens, and the only way to kind of get that back and going so we can have this more rational thinking when we are in our Olympic is to do these breathings. And the breath of the physiological sigh definitely does help that and activates the prefrontal a lot faster.
Yeah. Um, so I mean, I know some of the reasons, I guess, why I get into that thought process, right? I mean, my anxiety is going through the roof at the time. What are some of the reasons why that's the way we react, I guess?
It's to protect yourself. It's a defense mechanism. So why was your what was the situation, I guess? Like your son was our son was getting angry or maybe frustrating, just annoying you, or like you're trying to tell him something over and over again, and something in your past you've tried to do that and it didn't work out for you.
Right. So, I mean, for a law enforcement officer, obviously, that could go back to, hey, you just dealt with someone who you had to fight to put in handcuffs because they didn't want to go to jail. And it's
Mm-hmm.
just kind of coming back to you. And
Mm-hmm.
you don't realize it's coming back, and that's why it's coming back. But that's probably one of the big reasons, right?
Yeah, they call that confirmation bias. So your brain is pulling out all the cues it can for things like that, just to protect itself.
Hmm. That's just crazy how the brain works sometimes, huh?
Yeah, it is. I mean, but I mean, again, it's for your own good. I mean, that's the whole part of survival and evolution is just to protect yourself, and a lot of that is psychological.
Yeah. So I know we kind of derailed a little bit going into that, but I think it's important to talk about those things because obviously, if you're acting like that towards your children, that's your cop identity showing, like, hey, I need you to see my authority and listen to everything I say, and it can be detrimental to your family sometimes. And I know from my own personal experience how detrimental it can be and how much it will affect your family. So, about a year ago, I guess a year and a half ago now, I left the department I was with for 10 years because I was ready for something different. I wanted a new experience. I wanted to better myself a little bit. And I found a department that I went to that I thought was going to do that for me. I worked at the department for about 4 months, finished my training, and I made a couple mistakes and violated a policy. And I do that in air quotes, but I violated a policy or two policies, I guess. And instead of giving me the opportunity to fix myself, the department fired me. It was a very, very tough time because being a cop was my identity. That's all I knew. That's all I've ever wanted to be besides being in the Marine Corps. Being a Marine and a cop was all I've ever wanted to do in my life. Everything else was second to that. So when I was derailed from my career, it just destroyed me. I mean, it put me in a depression. Uh, it made me question everything about even being a cop. Was I ever a good cop? Did I ever do anything right as a cop? Because obviously, this tiny little mistake I made ruined my career. And for what, almost 8 months, I wasn't a cop, and I didn't know if I even wanted to be a cop again. I looked at civilian sector jobs. I just struggled, and to say the least, my alcohol consumption went up. Fights with my family went up. I was constantly angry, constantly depressed. Uh, there was nights where I would stay up all night just drinking because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my
Yeah, and it was really difficult too as your wife to watch you go through that. I mean, you went to like a severe depression. Like it was scary at times, and for me to just watch you go through that was really difficult, especially who I am, and I'm like, just talk to me, and it's like, well, you don't want to. Like, okay, you're my husband, I can't treat you like a client, and I didn't want to, but I just wanted to know how to help you, and it was hard. And I know we might be biased on this, but looking back at like these policies and stuff, it broke my heart because this is a department that really, really pushed. We are all for mental health. We're the first there to help you in your time of need. And I know through all of this process, your IA and all this, all the investigations that they ask you all these questions, well, what's going on, whatever, and they went to the bottom of all your issues and they knew everything. And and they were all mental health issues. Nope, sorry. Instead of helping you, like, not, you didn't even need that much help. You needed a little bit of break. You needed someone to talk to, and they didn't provide that. And most, a lot of departments don't, but this one just shines through of like, oh yeah, we're for mental health. And then that happened, and just to see the downfall in you and all the good things about you just like crumble, because that's what you thought you were. You just thought the cop was the only good thing in me, and I couldn't tell you, like, no, there's so much more. You're an amazing
Mhm.
father, you're an amazing husband, you've got so much going for you. You're funny. Like, there's just so much about you that I just wanted to tell you, but I couldn't, because you you didn't care. Like,
Yeah.
you didn't want to care because
I
you were so
I
depressed at the
wouldn't listen.
time.
I didn't. Yeah, I didn't care to listen at all at the time
Yeah.
because you're right. I was so depressed. I was miserable. I
Well,
mean, I when I wasn't drinking, I was sleeping.
yeah.
And it was just
Well, most of your validation came from being a cop, I think. And that's what validated you the most in your life. And that's what really motivated you to, live each day basically. And I don't mean to be that extreme, but that's where identity was at right there.
right. Well, I mean, and you've been with me for 16 years. You saw me struggle to become a cop.
Yeah.
You saw me fight and fight to finally get hired with the one department and finally get sent to the academy, and just to have it all ripped away like that. And
Mm.
and again, this is definitely bias coming from me, but the department there, like you said, they preach and preach how much they care about you and your family. I mean, the assistant chief wanted to even ask me about, oh, how many kids do you have? How your kids doing? And then proceed to hand me a letter saying that, well, we're letting you go.
Mm.
So it's like,
That's hard, yeah.
how are you gonna try to talk to me like we're family and friends, and then
Mm.
tell me you're firing me?
Yeah.
So yeah, it put me in a whole spot. So even worse was I was getting fired. I was also thinking about my three kids right at that moment because she had to go and bring it up.
Yeah.
So
Kick you while you're down, even though you didn't know you were down yet.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's it's awful. And I don't know. I think, being with you for 16 years, like, you make mistakes, right? We all make mistakes, especially like relationships. It could be like the smallest thing too, and you owned up to it, and you make the mistakes. I might point it out to you and be like, hey, stop doing that,
Oh, you
whatever.
do that? No,
No, no,
never.
no, never. But as a cop, I feel like you're never making the mistake because you were so particular about, like, I'm not going to do this at work. I would never do that at work. Or like, I'm very focused when I'm at work, and I'm going to eliminate certain things, and just your work came first. And you bring in the income, that's understandable. But when it came to making mistakes at the job, it was like, if you made the smallest mistake, even if it was not, a fireable mistake, it was like detrimental sometimes. Like, you would hone in on it and think about it for like weeks. You would ruminate on that until it was just exhausted, because that one little mistake, even though it was, settled, your superiors were like, oh no, it's okay now, like, just don't make it again, you still were just like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe I did that.
Right. I mean, well, when I devoted my life to two things and I'm finally in that and I don't want to lose it,
Mm.
it's one of those things that any little thing I do, I'm like, I have to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not better, I'm not good enough to be in this position.
Mm-hmm.
And that was definitely, I think, a little bit of low self esteem on my point because I always got told that I was doing a good job a lot of times, but any little bad thing, I ruminated on it.
And there's definitely, there's distortions in that, of course. And then, of course, you think this way because you want to do a good job, and you're out there, again, like we talked about this before, like, to be safe, and just not for yourself but other people. But I think when you have that mind mentality and some of those distortions at play to ruminate on those tiny little mistakes, it was all validated by the last firing you had, because it was a little mistake that happened, and they were like, oh, it's all these policies, or these two policies, and they labeled it something, and then they were like, all right, see you later. And then it just validated all your fears of like,
Yeah.
I made that
Yeah.
mistake, and now I'm gone.
Well, and then when they use that all end all unbecoming of an officer to fire you just because they don't really have a whole lot on you,
Yeah.
it kind of ruins you. It throws you through a loop.
And it leaves you kind of confused too, I feel like.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get in any trouble, had good marks throughout all my training with them,
Yeah.
and this one little thing. But
Well, let me ask you, if the cop identity, that police identity, wasn't the priority of all your other identities, do you think you would have had such a tough time in this transition, or do you think it would have been a little bit more easier?
I mean, I think the transition still would have been tough. I mean, losing a job in general, and then wondering how am I going to provide for my family? How
Yeah,
am I going to take care of my family? But yeah, I honestly, if I would have had more of an open mind of that, hey, it's just a job, you can get another one,
mhm,
and not this is your life, this is your lifestyle,
mhm.
then yeah, it probably would have been a bit easier.
Yeah,
So, but I mean, I can come back to it now after about a year and a half. That in the end, I think it all worked out for the better. Uh, those 6 to 8 months that I was not a cop, I definitely became a father again, became a better husband, uh, realized that being a cop, I love doing it, but yes, it is just a job. My life is my family, and
yeah,
that's what is the main thing to me.
yeah. And it's hard too, I think, for a lot of police officers to kind of get out of that, like, I'm a cop mentality all the time and have that identity just as the forefront. Um, and I feel like a good thing for you, like, was easy, was, having friends that weren't cops. Because there's a lot of cops out there that all their friends are cops. And then, like, what happens? Like, even off duty, you're talking about, like, suspects and stuff that you chase down the street and, like, experiences. And it's all kind of relates back to being a cop, or, like, the politics at your work. And when you have friends that have different jobs, like, now you're talking about something else and you're talking about their families and their job, and it kind of sets you a little bit apart from the cop life.
Yeah, yeah. And we're not saying don't be friends with your coworkers,
Oh yeah,
obviously,
no.
because I've got some of my closest friends are cops.
Yeah.
Actually, one of my closest friends is a close friend before we were cops, and now we're both cops still. So we talk about that, but then we also have that past that we talk about. But my best friends, my friends I've known for over 30 years, neither of them are cops.
Yeah.
And we can talk about other things, and it is nice. It's nice not to have to talk about the same stuff over and over again.
Yeah, definitely. And like hobbies too, I feel like are really important because, if you're kind of going out and shooting, or, whatever you, I guess that's not really a hobby, is like collecting coins, but things that are kind of like related to the cop lifestyle, like, having different hobbies definitely helps you kind
Yeah.
of get out of that
Oh
too.
yeah. I think me starting to play hockey now has helped a lot
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So I've never played hockey in my life, but I thought, hey, I've never done this. I've always loved the sport. Let me try it, and it is nice because the people I'm out there playing hockey with, most of them aren't cops. Now there's a couple of friends that I know play hockey that we play with together, but
Yeah.
most of the people I talk to are not cops. And it's funny because back when I first became a cop, I was all about telling people, "Hey, yeah, I'm a cop. I'm a cop. I'm a cop." Like I said, I wore all that blue line stuff all the time, which I'm not saying you can't wear it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. But now, if you saw me on the street, you would think I was stuck at being a 16-year-old wearing the same kind of clothes, jeans and a band T-shirt and some Vans or Airwalks or anything like that. People don't expect me to be a cop anymore. The only thing that would show that I'm a cop is my haircut now, I feel like.
Yeah, and your LA Night t-shirt.
Hey, hey, LA Knight's awesome.
Well, it's like, I know this is a cop, but like we used to read books, and like you would read nothing but like war books. I know that's like the Marine Corps
Yeah,
in you, but it
yeah,
was
yeah,
like
that's
that's
true.
all you read.
Nothing but
And
military books, and I'd read cop books.
yeah, and
Yeah,
not until recently. And you're like, we had a book club with my parents, and we started reading. Like, everyone got to pick a book, so obviously all of them weren't war books, but we got to pick other books. And you're like, wow, this is actually
I
interesting.
really
Like,
enjoyed it. Yeah,
yeah,
and then what did I pick? I didn't pick any war books.
you
I
didn't.
I,
No,
I picked ghost books,
no.
spooky stuff.
You're actually really good. I was impressed. But now, even like, you picked up a book, it's based on like philosophy and like religion and stuff, and it was like way out of your comfort zone. But then, like, all of a sudden we're having these conversations about it, and I'm like, whoa, like, we're not talking about Hitler anymore. Like, yes.
Oh, good. He's not talking about that duty arrested again.
It's kind of nice, but it kind of expands your mind, and it takes your mind off of the stressors that you deal with every day at work, because that's just enough.
Yeah, and it helps. It really does. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I still wear my gun and badge on me just in case, but no one would think I'm a cop
Yeah.
anymore.
I mean, you love being a cop, um, but I think you love being Ryan too, and
Yeah,
that's really important.
there's a lot to me that I almost forgot about.
Yeah,
Things that I used to love that I forgot about.
yeah,
It's nice to kind of be back there and to show me, not only you, but our children,
mhm.
who I can be, that I'm not just a police officer.
Yeah. And I think it's important too that that cop identity isn't priority anymore, but it's still important because yes, you do go to a job that's super dangerous, and you have to be, on your toes, and you still have that in play, and you still hold that as values to you, but it's not priority over like all the other good things about you.
Right, yeah. And like I said, my priority is always going to be y'all
Yeah, better
now.
be. Yeah, so I guess this is the part of the episode where we kind of dive into statistical facts about police officers a little bit, and I think it really is relevant to police identity because you're holding that police identity as a priority over all the other identities that you hold. It kind of goes into our self concept, which is our self other, how we view ourselves, how we view others, and how we view the world, which creates our core belief systems. And when you're getting into that, it's more of the cognitive constructs of ourselves and how we think. It's our thought patterns, and those can be really tricky sometimes. Like I said before, we have a lot of distortions that we believe in, and the thing with the brain is it doesn't know the difference between what's a fact and what's not. So if you're telling yourself a distortion over and over again, which is basically a lie in itself, you believe that lie as a fact. And it can get you into some pretty heavy thoughts, which can bring you into some pretty heavy moods, which, cause depression, cause anxiety. And a lot of times, in really severe cases, it could lead to suicide. And, um, in the police population, 54%, you guys are higher risk of death by suicide than the general population. A most recent study was done in 2022, said that 184 deaths were suicide, and then in 2019 was the highest rate of 234 deaths that died by suicide. Yeah, it's
Jesus.
a
I
lot.
mean, just, it sucks because a lot of that could be prevented
Yeah,
by realizing you're more than just a cop, your identity, but also just like we talked about in the last episode, talk to somebody.
yeah,
Don't be afraid to open up. If you're having those feelings, call a buddy, call a friend. Hell, call 811. Isn't that the suicide hotline number now?
yeah. I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's just, don't be afraid to talk to somebody.
mm,
It's so easy to talk to people.
yeah.
It's you're better here than not.
Yeah, definitely. And I say death by suicide because that's, the end of it. So, I mean, there's a lot of time before it gets to that point where you have plenty of opportunity, plenty of resources to reach out.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, you're there helping everyone else in your community. You can help yourself sometimes.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please do. And if you're listening to this and you're feeling like it, reach out to me. I reach out to our Facebook. I mean, I'll gladly talk to any first responder or hell anybody if you need a person to talk to. I've talked to a lot of people in my job that have wanted to hurt themselves, and I will always try to talk to somebody if I can. I mean, if I can be there for you, I will be.
Yeah. I think that went to the extreme right away because I think that's really important to talk about. But there is also um, other factors too, like relationships and divorce. I've got divorce rates here. I mean, you're 53% of police surveyed in recent studies reported a separation of divorce, compared to the 46% of the general population. And with the 53% that they surveyed, 31% were work related issues, 35% were not having enough time, and 19% were financial issues. And then if you put in, federal agencies, CIA, FBI, that number from 53 jumps all the way up to 70% divorce rates. Um, and it's just, it's crazy. Like the 31% of the work related issues, like that could definitely be prevented if you had more of an awareness of self, even.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're already going into this fighting a losing battle.
Yeah.
So why not take your health mentally, physically, take your family's mental health and well-being, take that into effect when you're trying to become, or if you're already a police officer, but especially if there's anybody listening that wants to become a police officer, you need to know this: the job is hard enough. It just gets harder at home sometimes.
Yeah. And going back to the identity thing, if it's just the police identity kind of overcompensating for everything, like we're talking about divorce, so you got a spouse there, so you're also a husband or a wife in the
Yeah,
situation, not just a cop.
and your spouse has an identity,
Yeah.
and that's something I had to learn. Was I knew my, I mean, I knew you. I say my wife, but you're right here. I knew you were going through all this schooling to do what you want to do, and it was unfair of me to really just think about myself and my career just because at the time I was making the money when you're doing something so stressful while you're taking care of our babies and carrying our babies and I was too worried about my own identity to even realize that and I missed a lot of good times that we could have had
Mm.
and I in a lack of better terms neglected you in those ways and it was wrong and it never should have happened.
Well, thank you. But yeah, we work on this stuff though. I mean, like you're a police officer. These statistics here are awful, 53%. And I was reading people in doctoral programs. It was like 55%. And my math at the time was like, oh, that's like 100%. Like we're screwed.
It's more than
Like,
100%. Uh-oh, what are we gonna do?
but either way, like these on both sides of it, there's pretty high. Like we're at risk of divorce. Like we are, the odds are against us completely.
Right.
And I think, yeah, I think I had too much of like, oh, we're gonna make it through. We're better than this. Like we're not like anyone else. Kind of like that false sense of confidence without actually working it out and not like having a communication with each other. And
Right.
yeah,
Communication's key, right?
yeah,
I mean, you hear that all the time from everybody. You got to be able to talk. Communication is key
yeah.
when it comes to all this.
I think understanding what the other person is saying too. Comprehension, I think, is even pushes
Communication
that
and
up a little
comprehension.
bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. If you don't have comprehension, the communication really doesn't mean anything.
that is true.
But yeah, I mean, we've worked it out. We've had issues, and we've worked through it. But some people might not be aware of the things that are bothering them, whether it be this identity that holds you, or like the stressors of the job, or like that miscommunication or comprehension of both parties. But again, if you're going to go out there and help yourself, there's always couples counseling too. That someone else is a mediator that's not part of your bloodline, not a friend, that could help you through all this. I mean, it's worth it.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Um, I guess just a couple other statistics I just want to throw out at you guys because it's when I was going over this, it was pretty high. I mean, all these things were elevated as far as the police population compared to general population. Alcohol and substance misuse as high as 34%, 18.1 in males and 15.9 in females. We're looking at domestic violence. There's 40% police officer family experience some sort of domestic abuse as compared to 10% of families in the general population. You're looking at 7 to 35% of depression rates compared to the 6.8% in the general population. Anxiety, usually anxiety disorders. You have 29% of officers had moderate to severe anxiety compared to 19% of the general population. And then finally, the PTSD, 7 to 19%. A 2018 study from the Department of Justice estimated that 15% of officers experience PTSD symptoms compared to only the 6% of the general population.
I
Yeah.
mean, like I said, you're fighting a losing battle getting into this. But I will say, and this is my own opinion, that domestic violence number needs to go down.
Oh, yeah.
You can't say you're a cop trying to protect people, taking other people to jail for it, and then you're going to sit around and do the same thing.
Mm. Why do you think that happens?
Stress.
It's probably a factor into it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Your wife doesn't want to listen.
Just smack her. It's fine.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
No.
1920s. Hey, I'm gonna get us Twitch for my wife.
This is where the dark humor comes in. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's terrible.
exactly,
Like, no, it
exactly.
happens and it's awful. And um, if you're aware of this and you're the one doing it, like, you know,
Stop.
stop doing it. I mean, seeking help in that aspect. Like, you go to a therapist because you're feeling a little depressed and you're having some issues, maybe behavioral issues with your family and you want it corrected. If you are aware that you have some anger issues that come out as aggression, go see somebody. Even if it's in private, secret, you're not telling anybody because you don't want your pride to get hurt, go see somebody.
Yeah, because domestic violence, you get arrested for that, you ain't coming back to being a cop, not for a long time, and by that time it might be too late. So
Yeah.
that's I don't think that's a fine you can come back from.
Yeah. And I think domestic violence in this aspect would be a whole episode worthy of it because there's a lot of good talking points about that from
Yeah.
both sides, too, both parties of that.
Oh yeah. Alrighty, guys. I think we've taken up enough of your time tonight.
Huh.
I hope we hope this has been a good episode for you. We hope maybe you learned a little bit from it and could take some of that and bring it into your own life.
Or don't, whatever.
Or don't. We can't
you
tell
want
you
to
what to
do.
do. Thanks everybody for listening to this episode. You can find us on Facebook. All episodes will be streaming on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. This is the Police Condition. I'm Ryan.
I'm Laura.
And we're 1042.